Welcome to Learn Commerce PU online classes. Don't forget to like our video and subscribe our YouTube channel for all the updates.
Hello my dear students, welcome to economics online classes. In the previous class we had been discussed regarding the liberalization and economic reforms under the liberalization under 1991 new economic policy. Let us move to the second part of the new economic policy 1991, reforms made in the field of whatever liberalization we studied, liberalization in the field of industry, liberalization in the field of finance and liberalization in the field of tax and external sector or trade reforms. Let us look at what is privatization, what is the definition of privatization and advantages of privatization. So, when the privatization introduced in India. So, as we know that LPG, liberalization, privatization, globalization. L means liberalization, P means privatization, G means globalization. Globalization. LPG stands for liberalization, privatization and globalization. So, after the 1991 new economic policy, this new economic policy introduced three new concepts as economic reforms: LPG, liberalization, privatization, globalization. So, first one we studied what is liberalization. Liberalization means free from the government control, either direct control or fiscal control of the activities of economy should be reduced, then only it is possible to improve the economy and economic condition. Next we are going to see what is privatization, meaning and advantages of privatization to Indian economy according to the new economic policy 1991 under the economic reforms, that is privatization. So, privatization is one of the way by which we can improve our economy. By the name itself it says that privatization, privatizing the economic activities, reducing the government control and shifting the government activity, ownership of the government activity to the private sector enterprises. Privatization ಅಂದರೆ ಖಾಸಗೀಕರಣ ಅಂತ. ಖಾಸಗೀಕರಣ ಅಂತ ಹೇಳಿದರೆ ಯಾವುದೆಲ್ಲ ಗವರ್ಮೆಂಟ್ ಸರ್ಕಾರದ ಆಕ್ಟಿವಿಟೀಸ್ ಇರ್ತದೆ ಅದು ತುಂಬಾ ಡಿಲೇ ಆಗ್ತದೆ, ಸ್ಲೋ ಆಗ್ತದೆ. ಎಕನಾಮಿಕ್ ಪ್ರೋಗ್ರೆಸ್ ಅನ್ನುವಂಥದ್ದು ಸರ್ಕಾರದ ಆಗು ಹೋಗುಗಳಿಂದ ಸಾಧ್ಯ ಇಲ್ಲ. ಆದ್ರಿಂದ ಯಾವುದೆಲ್ಲ ಇನ್ವೆಸ್ಟ್ಮೆಂಟ್ ಸೆಕ್ಟರ್ ಇರ್ಬೋದು, ಪ್ರೊಡಕ್ಷನ್ ಇರ್ಬೋದು, ಕನ್ಸಂಪ್ಷನ್, ಡಿಸ್ಟ್ರಿಬ್ಯೂಷನ್, ಎಕ್ಸ್ಚೇಂಜ್, all the economic functions should be shift from government sector to the private sector, not fully, partially. 50% of the government sector activity should be shift to the private sector. Well, what is the need of shifting this private sector? Means increasing the production, increasing the investment, increasing the employment opportunities, increasing the standard of living of the people and increasing the overall growth rate of the economy. Rate of growth of the economy is possible only with the privatization. It is believed by the this economic reformers, rate of growth is or GDP growth rate is possible through the privatization, shifting the public sector activity to the private sector activities. As we know that public sector activities are very delayed services, unable to progress our country. Private sector activities are very faster than the public sector because of profit motive. With the intention of getting profit, they are going to do the work at the faster manner. MNC companies and all, you know that. MNC company working more than that of the public sector, whatever working, because more faster than the public sector. It is because of they wanted to get the profit within a second, within a year, within a week, within a month. But government sector takes a long duration for their earnings. So, if the revenue comes or not, they never bother about that. So, profit is not their motive, social welfare is the motive. Welfare activities never gives us the better results and more revenue. So it is better to shift the government sector activities to the private sector activities. Thus 1991 new economic policy reforms, new economic policy 1991 said that it is better to shift the government sector activity or public sector activities to the private sector activities. Transformation of public sector activities to the private sector or private entrepreneur is said to be the privatization. In simple manner, transforming the public sector activity to the private sector activities. Private sector activities. For example, you can take the examples of educational institutions, schools and colleges. Schools and colleges run by the government is said to be the public sector, under the public sector, public schools, government schools. Private sectors, take the examples, very easily you can understand. So suppose all the schools were run by the government, there were limited schools, as you know that. So they never bother about the whatever the distance and all. So they just wanted to educate all, welfare of the people. But when that public sector activities is handed over to the management or private sector, they will be more conscious about that with the intention of making the profit. Anyhow, profit is the main motive of the business. If they are going to the profit, it is secondary. Primary motive is growing faster than the public sector. Thus, private sector or private schools are more conscious about the results of and development of the students rather than the public. Public sector, if they are doing the work or not doing the work, they are going to get the salaries from the teachers, institution building, everything physical assets were given by the government. They never bother about that. But private sector, private owner or any management, it is going to invest on that. So they wanted to take return from that. So is it profit motive also? It is better for the economic development. Thus, let us see the definition of privatization. New economic policy 1991 introduced privatization reforms. So what is this privatization policy? Privatization is nothing but, students, transfer of public sector activities to the private sector in general manner. According to the definition, the transfer of ownership, property or business from the government to the private, from the government to the private sector is termed privatization. What is privatization? Definition itself says, by the definition you came to know what is privatization. Transfer of ownership. By the definition we can make the points for easy remembrance. Transfer of ownership. How to transfer the ownership? Transfer of ownership from private to public. Sorry, public to the private. Transfer of ownership or property or business. Transfer of ownership or property or business. From whom? From government sector to the private sector. Government sector to the private sector. To the private sector. Government sector to the private sector. So by this you can easily remember the definition. The transfer of ownership or property or business from the government sector to the private sector is termed as privatization. So by the definition easily understand transfer of ownership. Transferring the investment capacity from investor of public sector to the private sector. Investor of public sector to the private sector. It is said to be the privatization. So privatization is good for the economic growth, for increasing the development of the economy faster than the development of other public sectors. So let us look at what are the advantages or merits or importance of privatization to our country. So, see here advantages of privatization, advantages of privatization. ಪ್ರೈವೇಟೈಸೇಷನ್ ಮಾಡೋದ್ರಿಂದ, ಖಾಸಗೀಕರಣಿ ಮಾಡೋದ್ರಿಂದ ಯಾವುದೆಲ್ಲ ಖಾಸಗೀಕರಣದಿಂದ ಅನುಕೂಲತೆಗಳಿದೆ ಅಂತ ಹೇಳಿ ನೋಡಬೇಕು. ಫಸ್ಟ್ ಒನ್, ಇಟ್ ಸೇವ್ಸ್ ಟ್ಯಾಕ್ಸ್ ಪೇಯರ್ಸ್ ಮನಿ. It saves taxpayers money. How it saves the taxpayers money? Suppose all the activities in the hands of the government means government will going to put tax on goods and service and direct taxes, income. But when it shifts from government to the private, it will save the taxpayers money. Money of the people will be saves. So they may get some profits. They may involve in the business and get some profits. So for using that they were going to pay the taxes. For that they were going to receive the income. If all the activities in the government means nothing to the people, just they should pay the taxes. Now instead of paying tax to the government for everything, they can do their own work, entrepreneurship or any business, involved in any business, and they can save their money and save the taxpayers money. Next is increased flexibility. Earlier it is rigidity. When all the activities are concentrated in the hands of the government, it is very rigid. It is very difficult to change the present economic system and economic. In present scenario, it is privatization is most important rather than the public sector activities. Thus, it increases flexibility. Anyone can establish the industries, business, everything. So it will make the flexibility. ಎಲ್ಲ ವಸ್ತುಗಳು ಯಾರಿಗೆ ಎಲ್ಲಿ ಬೇಕೋ ಅಲ್ಲಿ ಸಿಕ್ಕಿದಾಗ ಏನಾಗ್ತದೆ, ಜನರಿಗೆ there should be a flexibility complex increases. Rigidity ಕಡಿಮೆ ಆಗ್ತದೆ, ಇದರಿಂದ ಇಂಪ್ರೂವ್ಮೆಂಟ್ ಆಗ್ತದೆ ಅಂತ. Next, improve service quality. Public sector and private sector, while comparing to the public sector services, private sector service is very good. So compare with the public bus to the government buses, for example. So these transportation facilities you can take. You can take the any business activities. If the government owned all the activities means what happens? There is no time for the upcoming. There is no time for whatever the timings given to them. So lack of consciousness, lack of legality. So everything you can see, lack of responsibility, irresponsibility is more in the public sector rather than the private sector, because welfare motive. ಹೇಗಾದರೂ ವೆಲ್ಫೇರ್ ಆದರೆ ಆಯ್ತು, ಅವರಿಗೆ ಯಾವುದೇ ರೀತಿಯಾದಂಥ ಕಾನ್ಷಿಯಸ್ನೆಸ್ ಇರುವುದಿಲ್ಲ. ದಸ್ ಫೆಸಿಲಿಟಿಯನ್ನು ಕೊಡ್ತಾರೆ, ಬಿಟ್ಟರೆ ಅದು ಯಾವ ರೀತಿ ನಡೀತಿದೆ ಅನ್ನೋದಾದ್ರ ಅವಲೋಕನವನ್ನು ಅವರು ಮಾಡುವುದಿಲ್ಲ. ಬಟ್ ಇಫ್ ಇಟ್ ಈಸ್ ಗಿವನ್ ಟು ದ ಪ್ರೈವೇಟ್ ಸೆಕ್ಟರ್ ವಿತ್ ದ ಇಂಟೆನ್ಷನ್ ಆಫ್ ಗೆಟಿಂಗ್ ಪ್ರಾಫಿಟ್, with the profit motive, not welfare motive, then also it is good, they will provide the good services. Next one, privatization is very essential. What are the main advantage of privatization is increases efficiency and innovation. ಪ್ರೈವೇಟೈಸೇಷನ್ ಅಲ್ಲಿ ಹೆಚ್ಚಾಗಿ ಯಾವುದಕ್ಕೆ ಇಂಪಾರ್ಟೆನ್ಸ್ ಕೊಡ್ತಾನೆ, ಅನ್ವೇಷಣೆ ಮಾಡುವಂಥದ್ದು, ಹೊಸತನ ಹುಡುಕುವಂಥದ್ದು. ಆ್ಯಂಡ್ ಇನ್ಕ್ರೀಸಿಂಗ್ ದ ಎಫಿಷಿಯನ್ಸಿ, ಸಾಮರ್ಥ್ಯವನ್ನು ಹೆಚ್ಚಿಸಿಕೊಳ್ಳುವಂಥದ್ದು. ಇನ್ಕ್ರೀಸಸ್ ಎಫಿಷಿಯನ್ಸಿ ಆ್ಯಂಡ್ ಇನ್ನೋವೇಷನ್, ಅನ್ವೇಷಣೆ ಹೆಚ್ಚು ಒತ್ತು ಕೊಡ್ತದೆ, ಅನ್ವೇಷಣೆ ಮತ್ತು ಸಾಮರ್ಥ್ಯವನ್ನು ಹುಡುಕ್ತದೆ. ಸೊ ವಾಟ್ ಕೆಪಾಸಿಟಿ, ಅಕಾರ್ಡಿಂಗ್ ಟು ದೇರ್ ಕೆಪಾಸಿಟಿ ದೇ ಕ್ಯಾನ್ ಬಿಲ್ಡ್ ಎನಿ ಕೈಂಡ್ ಆಫ್ ಬಿಸ್ನೆಸ್, ಎನಿ ಕೈಂಡ್ ಆಫ್ ಎಂಟರ್ಪ್ರಿನರ್ಶಿಪ್, any kind of whether they can involve in the education sector, service sector, business sector or any other sector. So they can do their work according to their will and wish. Next one is it improve the maintenance. So private sector maintenance is good than the public sector. You can compare the private library to the government library. Government owned library, there is no proper arrangement of books, no one is going to listen about the availability of books or don't care about or bother about the library. But either the private institution or anyone is having the library, they were more bother about the maintenance. So even you can see the public sector, any PSU works, either the park or any kind of building, schools, anything, maintenance quality is good in the private sector rather than in the public sector. Thus privatization is introduced in India. So privatization increases investment capacity. It increases investment opportunity. New and new industries were set up. It will give opportunities to more and more investors, attract the more investors. Investment increases means when the investment increases, it will increases the employment opportunities, income of individual increases. When the income of individual increases, automatically purchasing power increases, demand for the goods increases, supply also rises. When the demand and supply is more, again the investment increases, thus overall GDP growth rate increases. Overall GDP growth rate increases. Thus privatization given more importance to increase the investment. In the privatization, investment can be increased, investment opportunities can be increased. It involves all the people in the economic path. Thus increases production. When the investment increases, as I said, production also increases. Thus it increases employment opportunities. When the investment increases, automatically demand increases, supply increases, employment increases, income increases, then production also increases. Overall GDP growth rate and national income of the country increases. Overall GDP and national income increases. Thus rapid growth rate of country's economy and economic activities is possible only with the transfer of ownership from public sector to the private sector, because public sector is welfare oriented sector, private sector is profit oriented sector. Motive is profit, motive is public sector, private sector is having profit motive, public sector is having the welfare motive. Anyhow, private sector is having the profit motive. Also privatization increases the country's GDP growth rate and country's national income. Thus new economic policy 1991 introduced the new concept or new policy called privatization, transformation of ownership from public sector to the private sector. Then only it is possible to increase the growth rate of the country and increase the economic efficiency of the country. Present economic scenario, you can say most of the cases privatization you can see, and 80% of all our economic activities is handled by the private sector. Only the 20% activities were handled by the public sector. Next class we are going to see what is three concepts we are going to see under the NEP, new economic policy. That is, under the new economic policy you are going to see the LPG. Liberalization we studied, privatization we studied. Next we are going to study what is globalization. Next class we are going to see the meaning and advantages of globalization. Thank you for watching this video.
Don't forget to like our video and subscribe our YouTube channel for all the updates.